Hello everyone, welcome back to OCD Recovery's YouTube channel. Today I have a very important topic, a topic that is infused in many different fears, all the way from POCD to HOCD to false and real event memory OCD, and that is why chronic guilt is never necessary. So to learn more about chronic guilt, one of the #1 books on the reading list for this is The Myth of Self-Esteem by Albert Ellis, which breaks down the concept of unconditional self-acceptance, because unconditional self-acceptance is extremely important for breaking down chronic guilt. Now, when we look at what guilt is, well, before I go any further, I do want to say this, because people ask me this all the time. They say, Nick, what happens if the event actually happens? And it doesn't matter if you're afraid of it happening or it did happen. Unconditional self-acceptance gets underneath all that. So I've heard a lot of things over the last couple of years, people talking about guilt, people talking about shame, and the genesis of shame and guilt. The genesis of chronic shame and guilt is completely from conditional self-acceptance. Why people say, I could never accept myself. Conditional, right? What's also involved with this? The fear of being an entirely bad person, which we know is not real, which we break down on many different videos. If you go underneath the acceptance playlists, all sorts of videos breaking down the theory of good versus bad people versus good and bad acts. And there's no such thing as a good or a bad person in its entirety. The fear of having societal rejection, also gigantic. So let's say you were completely rejected by society. Completely. Every person on the planet rejected you. Friends, family, everyone. Maybe you went to jail for 10 years. That would be pretty depriving in a lot of ways, but you could still learn to accept it while not liking it. I always recommend people to watch, when we're talking about shame and guilt and unconditional self-acceptance, watching Kirsty's video breaking down agreement versus acceptance, because a lot of the confusion with that, right? People are telling me, are you telling me I have to accept myself of if I accidentally harm my child? That's not what we're saying at all. Or agree or like it is what I want to say. No, we're not saying you would like it, but you could learn to accept it while being deprived of many things, but still unconditionally accepting yourself and the situation, which takes off the onion layer of that extreme guilt and shame. So again, guilt and shame, absolutely broken down in The Myth of Self-Esteem book on the reading list. And I always like to use examples because I'm a very example-based person. So let's say you had a fear of hitting someone on the road and hurting them, or maybe you accidentally did, right? You were texting and you hit someone and you hurt someone, right? They got out of the car and their necks hurt. So whether it's in theory or it actually happened, real event. Regardless, you still work on unconditional self-acceptance. There's no reason, no universal law why you would need to write yourself off for that one thing. Also, even if you did something that was, say, a little bit more malicious in intent, you voluntarily did that. And don't go too down the voluntary or involuntary. I'm just using an example. And you did something with intent and you hurt someone, right? You could still accept yourself unconditionally, and that still doesn't mean you're a bad person. You could look at that and say, ooh, that was a pretty bad behavior. It got me in trouble. Maybe I got a felony charge. The other family was really mad at me. Maybe they're going to sue me. Ooh, maybe my spouse won't talk to me. All the things that might happen, all the little ways the fear sneaks in. And every time you say, I can't stand it, or every time you say that would be terrible, or I couldn't accept that, you're just adding to that belief of conditional self-acceptance. So I'm here to tell you that there is nothing that warrants in any anxiety-based disorder or outside the anxiety disorders, because many people have the fear of rejection. The fear of rejection is arguably the most common fear among all humans across the board, no matter the culture, the background, it doesn't matter. The fear of rejection and the fear of being a bad person, which is intertwined in scrupulosity OCD, aka religious OCD, is very prominent. It's huge. And it doesn't really matter why we think this way, what the societal reasons or the dogma or the belief systems we have. We know that we can change that and look at it in a more rational way. Because again, nothing warrants chronic guilt or shame. Nothing you can think of warrants chronic guilt or chronic shame. How do we know this? Well, we look at people who have done some pretty horrendous acts and they're not chronically guilty, have chronic shame or chronic anxiety from it. They might one day come to the realization, maybe they're in prison for 2 life sentences. Maybe 10 years down the road, they're in their cell and they think, whew, that was some pretty bad stuff I did. But they might say to themselves, it's over. There's nothing I can do. I'm here for the rest of my life. I might as well make the best of it. So there's no situation where unconditional acceptance, one of my favorite quotes, which I kind of coined myself, is unconditional acceptance is boundless. There's nothing you can think of where it couldn't be applied. Some things might take a little bit longer to see and some not. So thank you so much. Don't forget to visit the website, ocdrecovery.com, under the resource tabs. If you go under OCD Recovery, the Facebook group, we have 16.3 thousand Facebook members. It's the fastest growing OCD Recovery / anxiety group on Facebook. A couple of years ago, it got started. I mean, when I joined it a year and a half ago, it was like 5,000 members. And then we have all the webinars posted in there. And you can email at info@ocdrecovery.com. Again, that's info@ocdrecovery.com. Looking for whether you want to do coaching, whether you want to do seminars and stuff like that. So thank you so much. Let me know how much chronic guilt and shame. As you know, I go through every video and answer every single comment, no matter what anyone says. I'm always open for a discussion. Thank you so much and have a great day.